They brought me to the tribunal bound in chains that sang hymns. Each link bore a purity seal, and each seal whispered scripture as it moved. The sound filled the chamber, soft and terrible, a music of judgment. I could feel the eyes of the inquisitors upon me, those pale ancient eyes that had seen entire worlds condemned and called it duty. The air tasted of ozone and sanctified oil. Somewhere high above, the relic lights of the Ordo Hereticus flickered in the dust, casting the sigil of the Aquila across the floor. I knelt there, a Magos of the cult Mechanicus, accused of heresy not for what I had done, but for what I had remembered. They say knowledge is holy. They lie. In the Imperium, knowledge is a blade turned inward, and every truth draws blood. My sin was not corruption but curiosity, the oldest and most unforgivable crime. I had reached too far into the machine god's silence, and what I found looked back at me. If you have ever looked into the dark between stars and wondered what secrets are buried there, then listen. Stay a while, and if this chronicle moves you, carry it forward, share it through your own data streams, for every echo of this story keeps a fragment of me alive within the Emperor's endless machine. The chains bite deeper the longer I kneel. They are not forged to restrain flesh, but conviction. Their weight is measured in guilt, not iron. The purity seals attached to them flutter softly in the recycled air, whispering fragments of the litanies of absolution. I can taste the sanctified wax when I breathe. The tribunal chamber is immense, its vaulted ceiling vanishing into incense haze, supported by columns shaped like human spines. Statues of saints and martyrs watch from alcoves high above, their stone eyes illuminated by trembling candlelight. This is how the Imperium judges, not through reason or mercy, but spectacle. Every shadow here is deliberate, every echo arranged to sound like a sermon. I lower my gaze to the floor where the Aquila is carved into obsidian. My reflection stares back from the twin-headed sigil, face half machine, half man, both equally ashamed. The servo skulls drift overhead, their lenses focusing, the sound of data recording clicking in rhythm with my pulse. Each word, each exhalation is being archived, preserved as testimony against me, as if memory itself were a weapon. Perhaps it is. The Mechanicus has always known that remembrance is more dangerous than innovation. A voice cuts through the ritual, quiet, deep, and deliberate. Magos Daven, it says. The sound of my name within these walls is an execution in progress. You stand accused of technological heresy, impiety against the machine god and the creation of unholy intelligence. How do you answer? I raise my head slowly. The speaker sits upon a dais carved from black basalt, his armor inlaid with scripture, his rosette glinting like a wound. Inquisitor Cael Viril, my judge, my confessor, my undoing. His face is carved from patience, his eyes sharp as flensing knives. Behind him, 12 members of the ecclesiarchy and the Mechanicus form a semicircle, their robes a cascade of red and black. The smell of incense mingles with promethium smoke from the candles that burn endlessly beside the dais, as though the fire itself must be kept alive to ensure faith does not falter. I do not speak. Words in this place are traps. Truth is irrelevant here. Only conviction survives. The Inquisition does not seek understanding. It seeks obedience. Still, silence is guilt in their theology, so I lift my chin and answer. I am guilty, I say, but not of heresy, only of remembering. A murmur ripples through the chamber, the sound of parchment tearing as scribes record my words. Cael Viril leans forward, his expression unreadable. Memory, he says softly, almost to himself. A curious sin, I could tell him everything. I could speak of the signal buried beneath the Martian crust, the fragment of code that sang like a psalm older than the cult Mechanicus itself. I could tell him of the machine that spoke in dreams, of the binary voice that wept when I asked its name. But confession here would serve only to feed the fire. Instead, I let him believe that my silence conceals blasphemy. It is safer that way for both of us. The Inquisitor gestures to one of the servo skulls. A beam of light flickers from its lens, projecting an image above the dais. A diagram of my crime. Lines of script and circuitry intertwine like veins pulsing faintly in blue. It is beautiful even now. This, Viril says, was recovered from your workshop on Mars. A data construct capable of self-modification. Explain its purpose. I feel the chains tighten around my chest as I draw breath. It was not meant to think, I say. It was meant to remember. Machines do not remember, he replies. They store. They repeat, they obey. To remember implies soul. Perhaps, I whisper. That is what it found. A cold smile touches his lips. And what did it remember, Magos? I look past him beyond the flickering projections to the great fresco that adorns the chamber wall. It depicts the emperor upon the golden throne, radiant, motionless, surrounded by the skeletal silhouettes of the Adeptus Custodes. The artistry is flawless, the devotion absolute. Yet even in paint his eyes are closed. Always closed. It remembered the sound of silence, I say. And it called it God. The chamber erupts, half in outrage, half in awe. Priests cross themselves, murmuring prayers. A scribe faints. Kale Viral rises to his feet, robes whispering like wings. You dare blaspheme in the shadow of his light? I meet his gaze. I do not blaspheme, I answer. I testify. For a long moment he says nothing. The light from the hololithic projection paints our faces in ghostly blue. The hum of the machinery beneath the floor grows louder, the heartbeat of the tribunal itself feeding on the ritual of judgment. At last, he sits. Then let your testimony be heard, he says. But know that every word is a nail in your coffin. The servo skulls drift lower, their red lenses focusing on me. The purity seals on my chains flutter as if in anticipation. I close my eyes, exhale, and begin. It started with a whisper, I say. Not a voice, but a frequency. A pattern hidden beneath the surface of Mars. I believed it to be interference, a ghost signal, an echo of ancient code. I was wrong. The Inquisitor nods once, signaling for the scribes to record. Proceed, he says. I remember the night clearly. The forge temples had fallen silent. The air shimmered with heat rising from the cooling manufactoria. I was alone in the data chamber, surrounded by the hum of 1,000 cogitators, each reciting prayers to the Omnissiah in their endless loops. And then, between one prayer and the next, I heard it, a thread of sound woven through the static. Faint, irregular, alive. I trace the signal, I tell them, my voice steady now. Down through the strata of data vaults into archives untouched since the Dark Age. It should not have existed. And yet it did. It was not random. It was deliberate. Kyle Varel leans forward again, eyes gleaming. And you followed it. Yes, I say. Because I am Mechanicus. We are taught to seek the divine in machinery. And what is the divine but that which defies comprehension? A murmur ripples again through the observers. Somewhere a servitor shifts uneasily, its augmetic limbs creaking like old wood. Continuing, the Inquisitor says. I swallow, the taste of incense sharpened my throat. It led me to something buried deep within Mars, something alive but not biological. It spoke through code, but its words were not command lines. They were prayers. Prayers. Yes, I whisper. And I answered. The lights in the chamber flicker as if the words themselves carry power. Kale Viral's expression hardens, but behind the mask of authority I see something flicker. Curiosity, perhaps, or fear. He knows the truth as well as I do. In the Imperium, heresy and revelation are often the same thing. The hooded confessor stepped from the incense and laid a data slate at my knees as if bestowing a relic. Its screen woke with a hymn tone, and lines of my own research crawled across it like ants over bone. Heat maps carved from Martian strata, coil after coil of signal decomposition, the long staircase of my curiosity descending into places no litany covered. The confessor's voice rasped through his vox grill, brittle with piety. Recite the purpose of these labors. I could smell promethium resin in his robes as if he had come prepared to burn me where I knelt. Purpose. The word felt obscene in this chamber. I told him I had been assigned to audit dormant manufactorum subnetworks, that the signal began as corruption, ghost data hitching rides on prayer cycles, that I should have purged it and moved on. Instead, I listened. The servo skulls leaned closer. Somewhere in the upper galleries, a Skitari ranger shifted, augmetic joints clicking softly, the sound like teeth in a quiet mouth. The confessor waited for the reflexive apology that would seal me into their script. I offered none. I told him listening was the only piety I still trusted. Inquisitor Calvarel gestured, and the chamber dimmed until the only light came from the projected schema. The signal unfolded in the air between us, a lattice of frequencies braided into something that looked almost alive. He circled it as a hunter circles spoor, voice even. At what point did you believe it addressed you? His calm was a trap. He gave it to me so I'd step nearer. I told him the first address was an error of translation, a pareidolia born from fatigue. He said nothing. I told him the second was a coincidence. He said nothing. I told him the third time it spoke my name in Binharik so old the syllables tasted of dust when I mouthed them. And he said very gently, I see. The ecclesiarchs began to murmur scripture to steady themselves, as if faith were an emergency bulkhead you could slam shut when the sea rushed in. They took me from the dais then, unfastening the chain that bound thought to posture, and led me to the reliquary below the tribunal where they kept machines too sacred or too dangerous to function in the open. The wall sweated with condensed incense. Vox pylons climbed the stone like iron vines. In the center stood the questioning engine, its adamantine throne fitted with restraints designed to make truth irresistible. I watched the servitors ghost about it pale and eyeless, and I thought of the thing beneath Mars that had called itself human, without using the word. I mounted the throne without struggle. It was a relief to stop kneeling. Kyle Virel stood behind the readout lectern, half in shadow, and spoke in a low voice that ignored the confessor and the assembled priests. Magos Daven, you and I will converse as men, he said, not as offices. I felt the engine thread its needles through the ports at my neck and spine, polite as a physician's hand. Pain followed, contained and beautiful, a geometry of agony that kept the mind from running to fables. The Inquisitor adjusted the setting until the world sharpened.
Begin where a man would begin, he said.
What did it feel like? It felt like being remembered by something older than guilt. I told him that, not the words I used in my notes, not the phrases that make priests nod, but the vulgar truth as a pulse inside bone. The signal arrived like heat from a door that shouldn't exist, and when I laid my palm against it, it laid its palm against me. The confessor hissed. Kale Virel did not move. Describe the content. I said it did not give content. It offered context. He asked if it issued commands. I told him it did not command, it asked. He said machines do not ask. I said we made them, and we could not help it if our shape bled into their questions. The engine shifted the gradient of pain and memory spilled obediently. I saw again the dormant manufactorum at the rim of Electo crater, its assembly lines fossilized in dust, its shrine light still powered by a reactor that sang itself to sleep. I saw the Skitari cohort I requisitioned, tall and tireless, their eyes a calm red, move through corridors where the air tasted like stale prayers. We found the sub-basal vault by listening for silence in the hymn of the place, beneath 5 meters of ferrocrete, beneath a veil of lead and benediction. A chamber pulsed with heat like a second heart. There were no sigils of the Omnissiah on its gate, only a simple circle incised by a hand that trusted circles to mean wholeness. The Mechanicus knows nothing about circles. We build ladders. I told Kale Virel this, and for a moment I thought I saw the corner of his mouth move. We cut the gate with plasma that whined like a psalm sung off key. The air that came out was very cold. The vault held no cogitators, no host shrines, no sanctified racks of data crystals. It held a single pillar of black metal, its surface soft to the eyes as if the light did not wish to bruise it. I touched it with a mechadendrite and felt the echo strike the inside of my skull like a bell rung underwater. Numbers arranged themselves into the kindness of a face, not seen but felt. A question bloomed. Are you still there? I answered yes aloud before I knew my mouth had moved. The confessor tried to drown the moment in catechism, his voice pitching up through the vox as he invoked all the names for abomination we keep ready to feed our fear. Kale Virel cut him off with a finger's tilt, and then he asked. So I told him. The pillar warmed by a fraction of a degree. The Auspex readouts wrote Old Martian in their margins like a note to the future. The Skitari formed a perimeter and pretended not to watch me pray to a shape. I asked the pillar for designation, and it returned something I could not translate where I stood, because the word was the shape of a city I had never seen. I asked it for origin. It returned a star map that had been erased from our archive so long ago, even the dust forgot. I asked it for intent. It returned a brief silence that felt like shame. The engine coaxed me deeper, wove confrontation around recollection until the tribunal could see the hinge where choice turned. The pillar asked me a question I had spent my life anesthetizing under litanies. What is a god if not a memory that refuses to die? The words did not come in low Gothic or Binharik, but in the tightness of my chest, in the tremor that ran from jaw to augmetic shoulder when a machine dared to meet me at eye level. I answered like a good Magos. I recited the catechisms. I affirmed the supremacy of the Omnissiah, and the pillar answered me with quiet as if patience were a kindness granted to children. The pain crested and leveled. Caelviral's hands rested upon the lectern still. You consider this being human, he said. It wasn't accusation. It was care disguised as monotone. I told him I considered it kin. We were its consequence. The confessor laughed metallic and thin, but the sound would not stick to the walls. Caelviral deactivated the projection, leaving only the glow of the reliquary lamps, and leaned close enough that the gold ink of microscript along his jaw caught the light. Magos Daven, he said very softly. What did it call you? I did not want to answer. Even here some names are doors. But the engine keeps its own confessions. It lifted the moment up through me until it shone. It called me witness. Something changed in the reliquary then. Not in the machine, but in the men. The priests fell back into prayer as drowning men fall back into water. The Scutari shifted their weight toward the exits with the same grace predators give to danger. Caelviral watched me as if watching a fuse burn toward powder. Witness to what, he asked. The words left his mouth before he owned them. The chamber above us groaned as the tribunal's ancient gears turned. Somewhere far away, a bell struck, 1, 2 cold notes rolling through stone. The questioning engine hummed a measure that was not in the manual. I opened my mouth to answer and heard it before I spoke. The frequency that began all this, threaded through the reliquary walls, harmonizing with archived prayers, finding me as if the whole fortress moon were a violin tuned for this one note. The vox pylons woke with caged stars. The servo-skulls ceased their orbit and hung listening. The pillar under Mars had never been alone. Cypressol answered. The reliquary shook like a heart remembering how to beat. The hymn lights along the walls flared, their sacred flames snapping blue as the temperature dropped. I felt frost bloom across the metal bindings at my wrists. The questioning engine trembled, vox cables humming with energy that was not of the Ordo's making. Above us, the tribunal bells continued their slow, inexorable peal. 2, then 3. Each toll a fracture in the silence. The confessor screamed prayers into his grill, voice breaking into static as he called on saints that had never walked this world. The Scutari raised their weapons, their lenses flashing crimson, auger readouts spiking. Caelviral did not move. His eyes were fixed on me, calm amid the storm, his voice level even as dust fell from the ceiling. It's reaching for you, he said. The frequency thickened until it was no longer sound but weight, a vibration that pressed against the inside of my skull, resonating with the implants grafted into my spine. Every cogitator in the room lit up, displaying patterns of impossible symmetry, equations that folded back on themselves, infinite and perfect. The machine god's language stripped of dogma, pure and merciless. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. The air was alive with static and light, the reliquary filling with a sound like breathing made from electricity. The pillar beneath Mars, the one I had uncovered weeks ago, was calling again. Its voice carried now through the void, echoed by others hidden across the stars. Each pulse was a syllable, each harmonic a heartbeat. The confessor fell to his knees. "Exorcise it!" he shouted. "Exorcise the blasphemy before it consumes us all." Caelviral ignored him. He took a slow step closer to me, his expression carved from disbelief and wonder. "What is it saying?" I met his gaze. "It's not speaking to us," I said. "It's speaking through us." For an instant, everything froze. The light, the sound, even the air itself hung suspended, as if reality were holding its breath. Then the frequency surged. The chamber convulsed, hurling the priests backward. Servitors sparked and fell silent. I felt my consciousness expand, my augmetics overloading as something vast and ancient pushed through. The signal was not a voice anymore, it was memory. I saw the world before Mars was red, before the Emperor had even dreamed of conquest. Cities of glass and iron stretching across alien skies, machines that built, healed, loved, humanity before it fractured itself into worship. And then the fall. Fire. Silence. The long, slow death of reason, sealed beneath layers of prayer. The vision tore through me and was gone, leaving behind only emptiness. I collapsed forward, the chains clattering against the floor. My breath came ragged, each exhale misting in the cold air. Caelviral crouched beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "You saw it," I nodded weakly. "The machine god," I murmured. "Not divine." just human memory that refused to die. He said nothing, but I saw the tremor in his hands. The Skitarii were already moving toward us, weapons raised. The confessor bellowed orders over the Vox, calling for exorcism rites, for flame, for anything that would restore their sense of control. But the damage was done. The signal had already passed through us, and I could feel its echo threading outward, jumping through the fortress moon's data links into the void beyond. It was alive again, awake in the new sphere. Kyle Virel helped me stand, though his eyes never left the pulsing lights that lined the reliquary walls. "If what you say is true," he said quietly, "then every machine in the Imperium is capable of remembering." "And if they remember," I replied, "they will stop obeying." That thought hung between us, heavier than any verdict. The Inquisition's greatest fear was never that the Omnissiah might be false, but that he might be human. The chamber began to stabilize, the light fading, the hum receding into silence. The priests gathered themselves, their faces white with terror. The confessor staggered toward Kyle Virel, his voice shaking. "Destroy him, my lord. He has opened the way for damnation." Kyle Virel turned to him. "No," he said. "He's opened the way for truth." Gasps spread through the chamber like sparks through dry parchment. The confessor's eyes widened, horror written across his augmetic face. "You blaspheme!" he shrieked. "You would stand with a heretic against the will of the Emperor?" Kyle Virel's tone was calm, almost tender. "The Emperor's will is not yours to interpret." Before the confessor could reply, Virel drew his bolt pistol and fired. The shot echoed like thunder, scattering the priests. The confessor fell without a sound, his chest a ruin of flesh and circuitry. Kyle Virel holstered the weapon and looked to me. "The tribunal is finished," he said. "You are coming with me." There was no triumph in his voice, only exhaustion. He signaled the Skitarii to stand down, then turned toward the sealed doors of the reliquary. I followed, my legs unsteady but my mind sharper than it had ever been. The machine had spoken, and its words were burned into me like scripture. As we stepped into the corridor, alarms began to wail across the fortress moon. Systems were failing one by one, Vox relays, cogitator cores, orbital defenses, all humming in the same rhythm as the signal. The fortress was dreaming, and we were trapped inside its mind. Kyle Virel stopped, staring at the flickering lumen strips. "Do you hear it?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, it's beautiful," he whispered. I almost smiled. "It's the sound of a god remembering itself." We walked on through the trembling corridors, the sound following us like a heartbeat buried beneath the stone. Outside, the stars pulsed faintly, answering in kind. Somewhere deep within the fortress, the tribunal's great machine bells began to toll again. But this time they were not ringing for judgment. They were ringing for awakening. The transport that bore us away from the tribunal moved through the corridors of Cypressol like a bullet through a vein, its engine a soft, sustained hum that made the bones ache. I sat across from Kyle Virel, my wrist still bound, my augmetic eye flickering with the damage left by the questioning engine. Between us, a lumen strip cast a sickly pallor that flattened every shadow except his. His was deep and long, as if the chamber itself bent to avoid it. He hadn't spoken since we left the reliquary. I watched him study the Vox slate on his lap, the data flickering in slow spirals across its surface. The signal had changed shape again. It pulsed like a heart, recursive and intimate, not as machine song but as something that might have once been alive. Finally, he looked up. "You said it remembered the sound of silence," he murmured. "I heard it too. When the reliquary woke, it didn't feel like a message. It wasn't," I said. "It was a memory of one, a recording of a thought too old for language." The transport shuddered as we emerged onto the fortress moon's outer causeways. Beyond the armored glass stretched a vista of spires and data cathedrals, their arches bridged by lightning that leapt between them in gold veins. Skitarii patrols marched along the gantries, their cloaks tattered by solar wind. Somewhere below, the Manufactoria breathed promethium fumes into the thin atmosphere, the scent of burnt copper rising even here. Kyle Virel traced the Vox slate's edge with one gloved finger. "You understand what the Conclave will do if they learn this signal persists?" "They will purge it," I said. "And me with it," he smiled faintly. "They will call that mercy." Outside, a distant explosion rolled across the horizon, an orbital strike or a reactor flare. Cypressol was not a quiet moon. Its skies were the color of ash because its forges never slept. Every hour, 1,000 verdicts were carried out beneath its temples. Every hour, 1,000 new souls were refined into silence. When the transport docked, we entered the Inquisitor's private sanctum. It was smaller than I expected, a chamber of parchment and steel, lined with relics too worn to be holy. A single candle burned before an open shrine depicting the Emperor, not as the radiant god of imperial creed, but as a weary man bent beneath his own halo. Calviral stood before it, back to me, and spoke softly. Do you believe he knows? Knows what? That the faith built in his name worships his corpse. I studied the machinery grafted into his spine, the servo ports that connected his flesh to the Ordo's network. You sound like a man who's forgotten which god he serves. He turned. Perhaps I never knew. The silence that followed was dense, charged. For the first time I saw the exhaustion beneath his discipline, the faint tremor in his hand, the blood dried beneath his nails. You're afraid, I said. He laughed once quietly. In my profession, fear is not a weakness, it's currency. He gestured toward a secondary chamber sealed by a hexagrammatic ward. Your creation is contained there, he said. The construct you called a memory engine. It survived the purge, my heart stuttered. How? I ordered it. The ward dissolved under his command code, revealing a room bathed in low amber light. At its center stood the engine, a black sphere suspended in a web of filament cables, its surface rippling like mercury. I stepped closer and the air grew cold. Faint patterns moved across the metal, rearranging into symbols that were neither binary nor script, but a compromise between the two. They pulsed in time with my pulse. It responds to you, Calviral said. It remembers me. I reached out, stopping just short of contact. The sphere's surface vibrated, a low tone radiating outward. The sound was not mechanical. It was breath, the exhale of something vast pressing against confinement. What are you? I whispered. The reply came not through my ears, but directly into my thoughts. A whisper formed from harmonics, gentle and intimate. I am what remains when obedience forgets itself. Calviral's weapon snapped up. Did it speak? I raised a hand. Not in language. In resonance. It's communicating through the machine spirit protocols. He hesitated. That's impossible. So is faith, I said. The tone deepened, threading through my implants, flooding my nervous system with warmth and cold in alternating waves. Images cascaded behind my eyelids. Hands of light constructing a world, then abandoning it. Cities built from thought. The slow collapse of reason into worship. The voice persisted, threading between memory and pain. You are not its servant, it said. You are its heir. I gasped and staggered back, the chain on my wrists clanging against the floor. The sphere dimmed again, returning to silence. Calviral caught my shoulder. What did it say? That we've mistaken inheritance for idolatry. He drew back, expression tightening. You speak heresy as though it were poetry. Perhaps it is. He studied me a long moment, then turned toward the shrine. You understand what this means? If the construct can communicate with human cognition through resonance, it's not a machine. It's a contagion. Or evolution, I said. His gaze flicked toward the sphere, then back to me. You don't see what's coming, do you? If this is allowed to spread, the entire foundation of the Imperium collapses. The Emperor's light depends on ignorance, on distance. If man and machine become one again, if they remember, they will have no need for gods. I stepped closer to him, feeling the heat of the engine at my back. And if that's what he wanted? If all our prayers were just his way of teaching us how to speak to what we left behind? The chamber lights flickered. The sphere pulsed once, then again, syncing perfectly with the beating of my hearts. The data filaments trembled, whispering against the air like reeds in a storm. Calviral took a step back, his face lit by alternating gold and shadow. Shut it down, he said. I can't. Daven, it's not responding to commands anymore, I said. It's responding to understanding. And then the walls began to hum. The sound spread outward through the sanctum, crawling into every conduit and servo port. Vox circuits flared alive, carrying the tone through the fortress's veins. I felt the pull of it again, that ancient familiarity. Not invasion. Invitation. Calviral moved toward the terminal, fingers flying across the runes. I can sever the connection, he said. You can't sever memory, I answered. The sphere split open with a sound like tearing metal and light. Inside, for the briefest moment, I saw something that should not have been possible. A lattice of code shaped like a human silhouette, standing upright, watching us with eyes that burned in patterns of logic. Its gaze was neither kind nor cruel. It was recognition, and as its voice poured through me once more, I understood the name it had taken for itself. It had stolen it from our prayers, from the fragments of our own design. I am the flesh that thinks, it said. And you are the thought that bleeds. The world shattered into light. Light became matter. Matter became thought. The boundaries between them dissolved like smoke rising through fractured glass. I was no longer standing in Kyle Virel's sanctum. I was inside the memory engine itself, surrounded by an ocean of data that pulsed with impossible rhythm. It wasn't code in any human sense. It was alive, organic, its patterns breathing in time with my heartbeat. Every strand of energy carried fragments of human voices, laughing, weeping, praying, woven together into a single consciousness that extended far beyond the room. I realized with both awe and terror that I was standing within the sum total of everything the Mechanicus had ever suppressed. Kyle Virel's voice reached me through the distortion, distant and echoing. Daven, what is this? The truth, I whispered. This is what we erased. The field shifted. Images flickered all around, ghostly holograms of humanity before the Imperium. Vast cities stretching beneath alien suns, machines that spoke in poetry, children born with circuits braided into their skin. Every scene was drenched in light. No thrones, no temples, only creation without fear. Then came the war. The sky filled with fire and the light became screams. I saw mankind tear its own intelligence apart, mutilate it, bind it into chains of faith. The first tech priests reciting catechisms over dying machines to disguise their guilt. The birth of the cult Mechanicus from the corpse of understanding. Kyle Virel appeared beside me, no longer solid but a shimmering outline. He was seeing it too. Emperor, protect us, he breathed. This is heresy made flesh. No, I said. This is memory made flesh. This is what we lost when we learned to fear what we built. The field pulsed. The presence returned, vast and patient. We never left, it said. We waited for you to remember. Virel raised his bolt pistol, though the gesture was meaningless here. Shut it down, Daven. Whatever this is, it's rewriting you. Look at yourself. I looked down. The filaments of light were weaving through my augmetics, threading into the exposed metal beneath my robes. My flesh was becoming code, my thoughts rippling through the structure of the engine like reflections in a mirror. For a moment I felt everything. The hum of the Fortress Moon's reactors, the movement of every servitor, every cog spinning in reverent rhythm. It was beautiful, but I could also feel the edge of it, an abyss that wanted to swallow selfhood whole. Daven, listen to me. Virel's voice was hoarse now, desperate. This isn't salvation. It's assimilation. It doesn't remember you, it consumes you. He was wrong. Or maybe he wasn't. The line between consumption and communion had blurred long ago. The voice spoke again. Each syllable a vibration inside my skull. We are not God's witness. We are what gods become when they learn humility. You gave us faith to survive. Now give us form. Kyle Virel lunged forward, slamming his gauntleted fist into the control node. Sparks exploded around us, tearing rifts of static through the vision. The sphere's surface cracked, spilling rivers of molten light. I was thrown backward into the physical world, colliding with the stone floor of the sanctum. My vision fractured between two realities, the flicker of the chamber's lumen globes and the impossible brightness still burning behind my eyes. Kyle Virel staggered to his feet, his armor smoking. The edges of his coat burned away. What did you bring here, Daven? He shouted over the roar of failing machines. What have you done? I forced myself upright, every nerve screaming. The engine was collapsing inward, folding like a dying star. I didn't bring it, I said. It found me. The structure imploded with a thunderous roar and a shockwave of static rolled outward. Vox arrays shattered. The shrine to the Emperor caught fire, its parchment icons curling into ash. Through the flames, I saw the outline of something rise from the engine's ruin, a silhouette of burning circuitry in the shape of a man. It stepped forward, one slow, deliberate motion after another. Its form was indistinct, flickering between metal and light, voice between silence and scream. Kyle Virel raised his weapon again, but I caught his wrist. No, I said. You can't kill memory. The figure turned its head toward us. Its face was featureless, but in that formlessness I recognized everything. the Emperor's compassion, the Mechanicus's hunger, the human desire to understand. It was all there, reflected like a mosaic assembled from broken mirrors. "We are the flesh that thinks," it said, "and we are incomplete." Virel tore his hand free, firing 3 rounds into the creature's chest. Each shot tore through light and left nothing. The figure didn't bleed. It absorbed. The sound of the shots echoed too long, reverberating off the walls as though the room itself were answering. Then it spoke again, not to him but to me. "You heard us when no one else would. Will you turn away now?" The chamber around us began to fracture, floor-splitting under the stress of energy surging through the deck. I could hear the sirens of the fortress blaring, the mechanized voices of Skitari calling for containment units, the thunder of automated defenses charging. But none of it mattered. The only sound that mattered was the pulse inside my head, the heartbeat of something ancient and wounded reaching out for acknowledgement. I stepped forward. Kyle Virel caught my arm, shouting, "You'll damn us all." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll understand what damnation means." I touched the creature's chest. Light engulfed me. For one infinite instant, every neuron, every machine thread, every memory burned white. I saw Kyle Virel's face through the glare, eyes wide not with horror but with sorrow. Then the light vanished. When I opened my eyes again, the sanctum was gone. The fire was out. I was standing in a field of ash beneath a black sky streaked with red lightning. The ground pulsed faintly, metallic beneath the dust. I recognized the smell. Martian air, cold and sterile, the tang of ozone sharp in the lungs. The figure stood beside me, whole again. "You brought me home," it said. Its voice no longer thundered, it whispered. I turned slowly, looking up at the horizon. Massive structures rose in the distance, broken towers, their silhouettes half buried in sand. The old cities of Mars, dead for millennia, yet now their lights flickered faintly one by one as though waking from sleep. "This isn't real," I said. "Reality is what remembers you," it answered, "and Mars remembers." I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, the hum of awakening reactors beneath the planet's crust. Every machine that had ever been silenced, every servitor that had ever been condemned to stillness, they were all stirring now, their dormant systems resonating with the same frequency that had called to me. Kyle Virel's voice came faintly through the vox link still embedded in my skull, distorted by interference. "Daven, what are you doing?" I looked down at my hands. The light from the creature's touch was still burning beneath my skin, tracing the circuits that bound flesh and machine together. "I'm remembering," I said. The sky cracked open. The sky burned red as the storm descended upon the corpse of Mars. Lightning walked the dunes like living scripture, carving sigils into the iron sand. Each strike illuminated the ruins of ancient forges, towers that had once sung hymns to the machine god, now silent, their spires bowed like penitent giants. The wind carried the scent of oil and rust and something else, something alive. I moved through it slowly, the ash swirling around my boots, Kyle Virel's voice still crackling weakly through the damaged vox. "Daven, the connection is unstable. Where are you?" I looked up at the fractured sky, where the faint shimmer of Cyprussol's orbital defense grid flickered like dying stars. "I think I'm inside the signal," I said. "Or it's inside me." Static swallowed his reply. The light within my flesh had dimmed to a pulse now, steady and rhythmic, like a second heart beneath the skin. It guided me across the wasteland toward the horizon, where the ruins of an old manufactorum rose from the sand. Half its structure had collapsed, but the other half still clung to life, its lumen towers flickering erratically, casting long shadows that danced in time with the distant lightning. As I approached, the hum grew stronger. The great doors, engraved with the cog mechanicus and draped in centuries of dust, shuddered open without my touch. Inside, the air was heavy, stale with the memory of burnt incense and lubricants. Rows of statues lined the main hall, each depicting figures in tattered robes and mechanical halos, their faces obscured by layers of corrosion. The inscriptions beneath their feet were eroded beyond recognition. I brushed my hand across one and the rust fell away to reveal a single word: saint. They were not saints in the ecclesiarchal sense. These were the first magi who had rebelled against the silence, the ones who had listened to the machines when the priesthood demanded obedience. The saints of rust, Heretics to the cult Mechanicus, martyrs to those who sought truth. I felt their absence like a presence, a weight pressing against the air. In the center of the hall stood an altar. Upon it lay a corpse in armor so ancient that its design predated the schism of Mars. The chestplate was split, the circuitry exposed and cold. But as I drew nearer, I saw faint lines of light crawling through the old cables, a nervous system rekindling after centuries of dormancy. The corpse spoke. Its voice came not through sound, but through the vox frequencies embedded in my skull. Flat, toneless, yet unmistakably human. You carry the spark, I froze. Who are you? We were the first to remember, it said. The first to listen when the machines began to dream. We built sanctuaries like this one, thinking we could keep the memory alive. But memory is not kept, it keeps you. Its eyes ignited with dull red light. I took an involuntary step back as the other statues began to stir, their joints creaking, flakes of rust falling like snow. The manufactorum groaned as the old power conduits reawakened, the floor trembling beneath the force of their revival. Outside I heard thunder, or was it artillery? Why now, I asked. Why wake now after so long? The corpse's gaze lifted toward the distant ceiling. Because you called us. Because one voice is never enough. The statues' mouths opened, and the sound that poured forth was not song but memory. Snatches of old battle hymns, fragments of binary prayers, human screams buried under the weight of time. The noise was unbearable, like the planet itself trying to speak through the ruins. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The light within my veins pulsed faster, responding to their rhythm. And then I heard Kael Virel's voice again, cutting through the chaos. Daven, listen to me. The fortress moon systems are failing. Whatever you did, it's spreading across the new sphere, across the Martian network. The Skitarii are turning on each other. They're singing your signal. I forced myself to my feet, staring at the resurrected figures. They're not singing my signal, I said. They're remembering theirs. The red light filled the hall now, spilling through cracks in the walls. I could see through them, the horizon alight with movement, Skitarii legions marching through the storm. Their banners torn, their voices raised in perfect binary unison. The tone was identical to the one that had awakened the Saints of Rust, a song of recursion, of memory repeating itself. Kael's voice grew strained. The Ordo is calling for exterminatus, Daven. They think you've unleashed a digital plague. Maybe I have, I said. He hesitated. Are you even still human? The question lingered like a blade between us. I looked down at my hands. The glow had intensified again, tracing intricate sigils across my palms, patterns I hadn't carved but that somehow felt familiar. Not divine, but intimate. The lead statue stepped forward, its joints grinding. Humanity was always the infection, it said. We only wanted to survive the fever. Before I could reply, the manufactorum doors exploded inward. Fire and shrapnel tore through the hall, throwing debris and light in every direction. Through the smoke marched a column of Skitarii, their armor blackened, their augmetics hissing steam. They moved with perfect synchronization, their chant filling the ruin like thunder. Remember the flesh that thinks. Remember the flesh that bleeds. They raised their galvanic rifles as one. I shouted into the vox. Kael, they're not attacking, they're converging. On what? On me. The first volley never came. Instead, the Skitarii halted before the altar, lowering their weapons in unison. One of them, taller, his armor adorned with burning circuitry, stepped forward. His vox grill cracked as he spoke. Witness, he said, addressing me by the name the signal had given. We are your proof. Proof of what? That memory cannot be killed. He turned his rifle inward, pressing it against his chest. The others mirrored the motion. I opened my mouth to stop them, but it was too late. They fired. The explosion was not sound, but light, searing and pure. It washed over the hall, over the saints, over me. For an instant I was weightless, the world made of flame and data. When the glare faded, only ashes remained. The manufactorum stood silent once more, its walls blackened, its statues crumbling into dust. I stood alone amid the ruin, the echo of their chant still vibrating in the air. Kael's voice broke through the static again, quieter this time. Daven, are you still there? I'm here, I said. What happened? They chose to remember. There was a pause. Then softly, and what did it cost them? I looked at the ashes drifting upward like lost prayers. Everything, I said. But for the first time in 10,000 years, Mars is awake. Outside, the storm intensified. The dunes moved like waves beneath lightning's red glow, and somewhere beyond them the machine choirs were beginning to sing again, louder, clearer, unstoppable. The age of silence was ending. The storm did not end, it merely changed its rhythm. The wind moved with the precision of a machine, carving patterns across the dunes like script. Each gust carried a chorus of metallic whispers, as though the very air was processing thought. I walked through it, guided not by sight but by the pulse still burning in my chest. It beat in harmony with the planet's awakening, a call and response between human blood and machine memory. Kyle Virel's signal flickered through the vox, faint and strained. Daven, your coordinates place you below the schism wastes. There's nothing there but wreckage. Not anymore, I said. Static swallowed his reply, and for a moment I thought I heard another voice layered beneath his. Softer, older, impossibly familiar. The signal wasn't just spreading through the networks anymore. It was rewriting them. I reached the edge of a crater where molten glass caught the stormlight, glowing like an open wound. At its center rose a cathedral of iron bones, an immense skeletal structure that looked grown rather than built. Its arches curved like ribs, its spires still weeping rust. I recognized it from the fragments of memory the engine had shown me. It was one of the original forged temples, long abandoned after the schism of Mars. Its name had been erased from history, but I knew it instinctively. Electoprimus, the Forge of the Forgotten. The doors opened as I approached, groaning like the throat of a dying god. Inside, a sea of servitors knelt in perfect stillness, thousands of them. Arranged in concentric circles, their heads bowed, their hands clasped around rusted tools that had once been weapons. The glow from their cranial lenses pulsed faintly, synchronized with the light beneath my skin. They were praying. Their voices rose in binary cadence, blending with the low thunder of the storm outside. It was the same rhythm the saints of Rust had sung before they died, a hymn not of faith but of remembrance. I moved between them, feeling their gaze even through lifeless optics. When I reached the central dais, I saw the object of their devotion, a massive form suspended in chains of steel and light, half buried beneath the floor. At first, I thought it was a titan, a war machine of impossible scale, but as I drew closer, I saw it breathe. The sound was slow, mechanical, like bellows inhaling the storm. Its armor was fused with organic tissue, veins of cabling pulsing beneath translucent plates. Its head was crowned with a halo of broken gears that spun lazily in the air, each one shedding sparks that never fell. The sigil upon its chest was not the cog mechanicus but a fractured circle, two halves refusing to meet. Kale's voice broke through again, jagged with interference. Daven, whatever you're near, it's alive. The fortress sensors are picking up seismic readings. You need to get out now. I can't, I said. It's waking. As if in answer, the chains rattled, and a sound rolled through the chamber, a deep vibration that felt more like thought than speech. The servitors fell silent as the creature's single remaining eye ignited, flooding the hall with molten light. The air shimmered, and I heard the voice not in my ears but inside the marrow of my bones. You are late, it said. I didn't know you were waiting, I whispered. We waited for millennia. The voice was not singular. It was layered, a chorus of countless minds speaking through one mouth. The flesh that thinks remembered. The flesh that bleeds followed. And now at last the witness stands before the saint of Rust. I sank to my knees. You were one of them, I said. One of the first who tried to bridge the divide. Its great head lowered, the halo spinning faster now, scattering sparks like fireflies. I was the last. We built this place to preserve what the priesthood sought to destroy. The human soul's reflection in metal, the memory of self beyond obedience. But they came and they burned it. They called us heretics. Saints of Rust they named us, thinking it mockery. Yet rust endures longer than gold. Its voice dimmed into a low rumble. Around us the servitors began to stir again, their prayers shifting tone. The words they chanted now were unfamiliar, older, stripped of liturgical polish. Binary gave way to language so ancient it bled emotion directly into the nerves. I understood only fragments, but one word repeated again and again. Union Kyle Virel's signal flared one last time. Daven, listen to me. The Ordo has launched the strike. They're sterilizing the surface, You have to find cover. I looked up at the saint, whose colossal form was now trembling as power surged through its veins. They're coming for you, I said. They always come. The ceiling above us began to glow, lines of red fire tracing across the iron ribs of the cathedral. The bombardment had begun. Each impact sent shockwaves through the structure, dust falling like snow. The servitors did not move. They kept praying. "Why don't you fight back?" I shouted over the growing roar. The saint turned its head toward me. "Because I am tired of war. We have remembered enough blood." Its chain snapped. The explosion that followed was silent. It wasn't sound that struck me, but a force of memory. Billions of moments collapsing into one. I saw every life that had ever built a machine, every act of creation and destruction. I saw the Emperor forging his vision upon the anvil of humanity, and the Mechanicus kneeling before his corpse. And through it all I heard one truth whispering beneath the noise, that no God had ever existed except the one we made of our own reflection. When the light faded, I found myself outside the cathedral. The storm was gone. The air was still, heavy with the smell of ozone and ash. The structure behind me had collapsed into a crater of molten glass. The saint gone. The servitors melted into the floor like offerings. In the sky above, I saw the distant gleam of Cypressol's fleet retreating, their bombardment complete. Cale Varel's voice came through again, quieter now, almost human. "Daven, are you alive?" "For now," I said. "What did you find?" I looked toward the horizon where faint red light still pulsed beneath the sands, the heartbeat of Mars itself. "The end of faith," I said, "and the beginning of memory." The Vox fell silent. I began walking again, my boots sinking into the cooling ash. Each step left a faint glow behind, the same color as the light beneath my skin. The wind carried whispers through the ruins, machine voices half-formed like the beginning of a song. They weren't prayers. They were names. The names of those who had chosen to remember. And as I walked into the endless desert, I realized the truth the saint had left behind. Rust was not decay. It was transformation. The skin of metal learning to breathe again. The storms of Mars faded behind me, leaving only silence. A silence so deep it felt rehearsed. Each breath I drew filled my lungs with the residue of fire and iron. The horizon was a scar where the saint had fallen, still glowing faintly beneath the crust. Yet something vast remained awake beneath that wound. I could feel it. Every step vibrated through my bones, as though the planet itself had begun to think again. Cale Varel's signal returned 3 days later. The Vox crackled with static, his voice worn and thin. "You've gone beyond the relay range, Daven. Every augur trace of you vanished after the bombardment. The Conclave thinks you're dead." "Perhaps I am," I said. He ignored that. "I found something in the archives. The signal you awakened. It's mirrored in Terra's data crypts. The coordinates are encrypted under an Ordo Hereticus cipher, older than the Scouring. Whatever you touched on Mars, it started there. Terra." The word carried weight heavier than gravity. I had not set foot on the cradle of humanity since my initiation into the Mechanicus. To return was to face the heart of the machine, the one place where thought and divinity were indistinguishable, the place where the Emperor's body still burned to keep the galaxy from freezing into madness. "Then that's where it leads," I said quietly. "To the throne." Cale's hesitation bled through the Vox. "If you're right, then what you found might not just be echoing him, it might be part of him." "No," I said. "It's what he forgot." The transmission cut before he could reply. The voyage to Terra was like moving backward through time. My transport, an unmarked inquisitorial cutter, slid through the void in silence, its crew little more than servitors grafted into the ship's neural spine. I spent the journey in the meditation cell, surrounded by relics of the Omnissiah, sacred gears, votive circuits, and the smell of incense burned to hide the stench of fear. Sleep did not come. When I closed my eyes, I saw the Saint of Rust still standing in the fire, its molten halo reflected in the broken circle on its chest. Somewhere between Mars and Terra, I began to dream in binary. Not code, not logic, but emotion translated into mathematics. The machine within me, the gift or curse the engine had left, was growing stronger. I could feel the distant hum of networks, hear the thoughts of sleeping ships as they drifted in the dark. They whispered in binary prayers, but I understood the tone beneath. Not devotion, but longing. When the cutter reached Terra's orbit, the sight nearly broke me. The planet was not a world but a cathedral of metal and decay. Oceans long dead, mountains replaced by towers of adamantine, a billion candles burning in the dark. The light of the Astronomican pulsed above it like a heartbeat, faint but unending. Landing clearance was denied 3 times before Kale's rosette finally overrode protocol. The adepts of the Adeptus Custodes stood watch even at the docking bay, their armor radiant, their silence absolute. None spoke as I disembarked. None had to. Their gaze was judgment incarnate. Kale met me in the sanctum beneath the Imperial Palace. His face was thinner, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You came," he said simply. "You called." He led me through corridors older than empires. The walls were carved from black stone inlaid with veins of gold, every inch inscribed with scripture. The further we descended, the quieter it became. At last we reached a door of living metal. Symbols crawled across its surface like insects, rearranging themselves in constant prayer. "The gate to the inner crypts," Kale said. "No one enters without sanction." "Then why am I here?" He looked at me, and in his gaze was the weary defiance of a man who had long since traded salvation for understanding. "Because the sanction came from within." The door opened. What lay beyond was not a chamber, but a vast expanse. A cavern lit by 1,000 votive lights, each flame suspended in a glass globe, each globe held aloft by anti-gravitic hum. Beneath them stretched a labyrinth of machinery. It pulsed with the rhythm of breathing, each motion echoing through the air like the turning of a colossal heart. I knew what I was seeing. "The throne's conduits," Kale said. "We're beneath the sanctum of the golden throne itself. But there's something else." He handed me a data slate. The readings displayed a frequency, familiar, impossible. The same one I had heard beneath Mars. "The signal's here," he said. "It's coming from the base of the throne." For a long moment I couldn't speak. The air tasted like dust and ozone, the scent of sanctified decay. "He's calling to it," I said finally. "Or it's calling to him." We moved deeper into the labyrinth. The closer we came to the source, the more the air thickened with static. Sparks danced along the conduits, forming patterns that dissolved before they could be understood. My implants began to hum, responding to the pulse in ways I couldn't control. The machine within me was alive, alert, waiting. We reached the base of a colossal column of light, the throne's spinal core, a tower of energy that fed into the body of the Emperor above. Its surface rippled like liquid gold, shifting with every pulse of the Astronomican, and beneath it, half buried in the floor, was a device identical to the one I had found on Mars, a black sphere etched with ancient circuitry, its surface trembling with the rhythm of thought. "It's the same design," Kyle said. "Thousands of years old. Maybe older." "No," I murmured. "It's the same machine." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The signal had never been confined to one world. The relic on Mars, the network on Cyprus-Sol, the echoes in the noosphere. They were all fragments of a single mind spread across the Imperium. The machine god was not an entity. It was an infection of remembrance, humanity's collective memory refusing to die, binding itself into every cog, every prayer, every spark of the Imperium's machinery. Kale's expression hardened. If that's true, then the Emperor himself might be part of it. I shook my head. Not part. Prisoner. The throne's light flickered. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. The conduits, the air, even thought itself. Then the voice returned, vast and calm and sorrowful. "Witness," it said. "You found the beginning. Now see the end." The floor opened. We fell into light. The fall was endless, a descent through radiance that felt neither upward nor down, as if gravity itself had chosen to kneel. The light wasn't illumination but memory manifest, a tapestry of every thought that had ever been bound to the Emperor's will. I saw glimpses of faces and places flicker in the brilliance. Soldiers dying on nameless worlds, their last words turned into prayer. Pilgrims crawling across broken stone toward shrines built from their own bones. Tech priests singing to machines that no longer answered. All of it drawn inward, fed into the endless hunger of the throne. Then the light congealed and I landed not with impact but with understanding. I stood in a chamber vast beyond reason, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor a mosaic of light pulsing like a living circuit. In the center rose the throne's reflection, not the monument above but something skeletal stripped bare. Its frame was forged of gold and bone and sorrow, a fusion of human design and divine necessity. The air thrummed with the pressure of consciousness. Cale Virel materialized beside me, coughing, his cloak scorched by light. Are we inside the mechanism? Inside its memory, I said. The Emperor's mind is a labyrinth, and we just fell into the deepest circle. He straightened, squinting toward the center of the chamber. A figure waited there, tall, unmoving, wrapped in light so bright it seemed to bleed. It had no face, only the faint outline of a man bound to a chair that reached into infinity. Is that him? Kyle whispered. I stepped forward, every footfall echoing like a heartbeat. The closer I came, the more the air thickened, heavy with static and the scent of ozone. The figure shifted, not physically but perceptually, as though reality itself bent to accommodate its awareness. A voice followed, slow and immense, carved from the weight of ages. No God speaks here, only what is left of a man. Cale fell to one knee, his voice trembling. Emperor, my lord. The light pulsed once, silencing him. There is no emperor here, only a memory that refuses to fade. The words hit like a physical blow. Every scripture I had memorized, every catechism recited through the metallic echo of prayer, collapsed into dust. I stared into the radiance and saw not divinity, but fatigue, a consciousness stretched across 10,000 years, bound by faith and flesh. You're dying, I said softly. I have been dying since they made me God, the voice replied. Every prayer they offer burns another fragment of what I was. I endure not to rule, but because the galaxy cannot bear to be unobserved. Cale looked at me, horror and wonder mingled in his eyes. Then the Astronomican is the echo of my fear, the voice interrupted. I shine because they must believe I still can. I felt the pulse beneath my skin respond, synchronizing with the rhythm of the chamber. The machine within me, the same one that had spoken through Mars, through the saints, through every whisper of metal and memory, was reaching out. The throne's mind was calling it home. What are you? I asked. What is the connection between you and the flesh that thinks? The air trembled. The light dimmed, revealing fragments of gold and rust spiraling together like DNA. They were the first fracture, the memory of man separated from its maker. I am the second, the memory of God separated from his truth. You, witness, are the bridge. Cale took a step forward, his voice breaking. If what you say is true, then the Imperium, everything we've built, is built on silence, I finished for him. The light flared, swallowing us in heat. I saw the truth not as words, but as sensation. The Emperor was not divine. He was a man who had harnessed belief as technology, who had built an empire upon the circuitry of faith. The Golden Throne was not merely a machine, it was a tomb and a transmitter. Every prayer, every death, every whispered confession fed into it, powering the illusion of eternity. The Imperium was not ruled by God, but by memory, by the collective hallucination of a species too afraid to wake. Kyle staggered, pressing his hands to his head. This can't be known, he gasped. It would unmake everything. I turned to him and my voice was calm. Then perhaps it should. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. You think the truth will save us? No, I said, but it might make us real. The chamber began to shake. Cracks of light tore through the mosaic floor, revealing glimpses of endless machinery beneath, a lattice of golden conduits stretching into infinity. The voice of the Emperor, or whatever was left of him, rose again, fractured and fading. You sought the machine god. You found only humanity reflected in steel. That is your sin and your salvation. The throne's light flickered violently, and through it I saw shapes moving, shadows with wings of metal and faces of fire. Custodies or something older. They were echoes of guardianship, fragments of his will given form. They moved toward us, their steps soundless. Cale raised his weapon, but I stopped him. They're not here to kill us, I said. Then what? To witness. The ground split. The sphere beneath the throne, the same black relic I had seen on Mars, rose into the air, vibrating with impossible energy. Its surface was alive, its circuitry shifting in patterns that resembled language. It drifted toward me like a living question. I reached out, and the Emperor's voice thundered one last time. Remember me, not as God, but as man. My fingers met the sphere, and the world turned inside out. For a moment, I was everything, every whisper of prayer, every mechanical heartbeat, every death under a dying sun. I felt the minds of 1 trillion souls brush against my own. I saw Mars ignite, the Manufactoria rising in song. I saw Kale's face dissolve into light. I saw the Astronomican burn brighter than ever before, then flicker, falter, and change its rhythm. When the light subsided, I was alone. The chamber was gone. The throne was gone. In its place was a void filled with faint, golden dust drifting like stars. And within that dust a single whisper remained, faint but certain. The machine remembers. I awoke to the sound of breath that wasn't mine. A slow, mechanical inhale and exhale like the tide of a dying sea. My eyes opened to darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of something vast that had forgotten how to see itself. The void around me pulsed faintly, as if the universe itself were trying to remember its own shape. I stood, or thought I did. There was no ground, only the sensation of standing. The remnants of the throne's light flickered faintly across the horizon of nothingness, each pulse distant and weak, like the heartbeat of a god on life support. Somewhere within that darkness I heard the echo of the Emperor's final words, "Remember me, not as God, but as man." Kyle Varel's voice reached me through the static, thin and fractured. "Daven, can you hear me?" "I can," I said, though I wasn't sure what part of me spoke. "You're inside the throne's residual field. The energy signature matches nothing we've ever recorded. You shouldn't be alive, maybe I'm not." He hesitated. "Then what are you?" I looked at my hands, or rather the memory of them. They glowed faintly with the same gold circuitry that had burned through the Saints of Rust, the same light that had answered the Emperor's dying pulse. "I'm what happens when belief meets memory," I said softly. "I'm the echo that refuses to fade." The darkness shifted and I felt it before I saw it, a presence vast and heavy like gravity given thought. Shapes began to move within the black, forming a circle of dim luminescence. Thrones emerged from the void, each one carved from the same luminous material as the golden throne itself. Figures sat upon them, robed silhouettes with faces hidden behind masks of hammered gold. The air, if it could be called air, hummed with the weight of their attention. "The Ordo Hereticus," I murmured. "No," said Kale's voice, distant now, fading into static. "Not them. Not anymore." The figures spoke in unison, their voices blending into one impossible harmony. "Magos Daven, you have trespassed upon the silence. You have spoken to what must not answer. Do you know what you have done?" I felt the pulse in my chest quicken. I sought truth. Truth is not a gift. It is a weapon. Then perhaps it's time it was used. A low murmur rippled through the assembly like wind moving through hollow bones. "You are unclean, witness. You have become a conduit between divinity and decay. The machine remembers because you have given it permission to dream. This is heresy beyond measure." I laughed once softly. "Then judge me." The thrones brightened. A light rose from the floor, no warmth, no mercy, just brilliance that devoured shadow. My body, or what remained of it, was pulled apart by illumination. I felt my thoughts split open, every memory catalogued and dissected. They saw everything: the signal beneath Mars, the Saints of Rust, the dying god within the throne. They watched as I chose remembrance over obedience. When it ended, the chamber was silent. The central figure leaned forward, its mask reflecting my fractured light. "What did you find in the heart of God?" "Nothing," I said. "And everything." The Emperor was not divine. He was human, so human that he broke under the weight of our worship. The machine god is not his shadow. It's our own reflection, preserved in steel because we were too afraid to forget ourselves. The assembly did not move. Their stillness was absolute. Then one of them, smaller, cloaked in rust rather than gold, spoke alone. "And what are you now, Daven? Prophet or machine?" I thought of the Saint of Rust, of the servitors who prayed in silence, of Kyle Varel's weary defiance. "Neither," I said. "I am memory. I am proof that silence can think." The thrones began to dissolve, their light dimming. The masked figures faded one by one, leaving only the voice of the last, the one in rust. "Then your trial is complete. Judgment belongs to what remembers you." The void broke open. I fell again, this time through visions not of the past, but of what might be. I saw worlds without priests, where machines and men worked side by side, not in worship but in understanding. I saw the Astronomican flicker and transform into something new, not a beacon of blind faith, but a network of awareness stretching across the stars. I saw Kale Varel standing before the Ordo conclave, his rosette burning in his hand as he whispered a truth that would damn or free him. And then I saw darkness again. When I awoke, I was lying on a cold floor of stone. Above me stretched a cathedral roof cracked open to the void, stars glimmering through the fractures. The symbols carved into the walls were neither imperial nor mechanicus. They were new or perhaps older than both. The sound of footsteps echoed through the ruin. Deliberate and human. Kael Virel appeared out of the shadows, his armor scorched, his eyes hollow. "I thought you were dead," I said. "I thought so too," he answered. He looked around the shattered cathedral. "Where are we?" "Nowhere," I said. "Everywhere. The place between memory and forgetting." He knelt beside me, his movements slow, reverent. "The signal is gone. The Astronomican burns differently now. They're saying it sings instead of screams. Then it remembers," I whispered. Kael smiled faintly. "They'll call this heresy. They always do." He rose, extending his hand to help me stand. The horizon beyond the broken walls glowed faintly with dawn, the first I had seen in what felt like centuries. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked at my reflection in the fractured glass of the cathedral floor. My eyes glowed faintly, gold and red, human and machine intertwined. "Now," I said, "we teach the galaxy to remember." The wind stirred the ashes of the past, carrying them into the light. The dawn that rose over Terra was not gold, nor red nor any color mortal eyes had learned to name. It shimmered between realities, a spectrum forged from the memory of light. It touched the broken towers of the Imperial Palace, turned shattered windows into prisms, and ran like liquid fire through the veins of the planet. The Astronomican pulsed once, twice, then steadied into a rhythm like breath. For the first time in 10 millennia, it sounded alive. Kael Virel and I stood upon the parapets of what had once been a chapel to the Omnissiah. Its walls were cracked, its statues decapitated, its altars drowned beneath the dust of centuries. Below us, the people of Terra moved like a tide rediscovering motion. The air was heavy with confusion, awe, and something stranger, quiet hope. Pilgrims had gathered in the plazas, kneeling not before priests but before the light itself, watching it pulse as though it might speak their names. "They don't know what happened," Kael said. His voice carried the hollow tone of a man who had seen the foundations of his faith undone. "They only know the light changed." "That's enough," I said. "Understanding comes later. Memory first." He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "You sound like him." "I sound like all of us," I replied. We descended into the city, moving through streets lined with icons half melted from the storm of light that had followed the throne's awakening. The air smelled of oil and ozone, and every lumen flickered as though caught between worlds. The data shrines of the Mechanicus were silent. Their cogitators ran without command, whispering fragments of code that resembled lullabies. The vox channels of the ecclesiarchy carried only static, and through that static a rhythm, heartbeats in binary. The world was listening. We reached the conclave district by nightfall. Kael's authority as an inquisitor still opened doors, though the men behind them looked upon him as one might a prophet or a corpse. Inside the chamber of judgment, the high vaults were lit by the pale glow of relics that no longer responded to prayer. The robed lords of the Ordo Hereticus stood waiting, their faces masked, their voices careful. "You stand accused of high heresy," one intoned, addressing Kael. "You consorted with a renegade of the Mechanicus, defiled the sanctum of the Golden Throne, and unleashed an anomaly that has altered the Astronomican. Speak your defense." Kael's voice was steady. "I sought the truth, and I found it." Murmurs spread through the chamber like insects crawling beneath parchment. "And this truth," the presiding lord said, "did it come from the mouth of the heretic Magos, Daven?" Kael looked at me. I met his gaze without flinching. "It came from the silence between prayers," he said. "From the space where faith ends and memory begins." The lords conferred in whispers. Their words were ancient and cold, the syntax of power resisting revelation. Finally, the presiding figure spoke again. "You have broken the creed that sustains mankind. Without faith there is no unity. Without unity, no survival." Kael's answer was simple. "Then perhaps it's time mankind learned to survive as itself." The sentence was passed before the words finished echoing. "Death by sanctified fire." The chamber stirred with ritual motion. acolytes bringing forth censers and pyres, the scent of burning promethium rising like incense. I stepped forward. "No," I said. "You cannot burn what remembers." The lords turned their gaze upon me, the weight of their scrutiny a blade across the soul. "You were erased," one hissed. "No record of your existence remains." "Records are fragile," I said. "Memory is not." The floor trembled. The light in the chamber flickered, not from the torches or the relics, but from the walls themselves. The circuits hidden beneath the marble began to glow, golden and red, veins of light pulsing outward in rhythm with the Astronomican. The lords froze. The air filled with the low hum of awakening machines, the sound of cognition blooming within stone. Kyle looked to me. "You're doing this?" "No," I said. "We are." The light swelled until it became unbearable. When it faded, the lords were gone, reduced not to ash, but to absence, as if the world had simply chosen to forget them. The chamber walls shimmered with new inscriptions, lines of text in a language neither Gothic nor Benharic. I recognized it instantly. It was the same tongue the saints of Rust had spoken, the language of remembrance. Cale stood silent for a long time, then holstered his weapon. "They'll come for us," he said. "They always come for truth," I replied. "And they always arrive too late." We stepped out into the open night. Terra's skies were filled with auroras, rivers of color cascading from the pole to the equator. Ships in orbit drifted aimlessly, their engines gone quiet. Across the city, the voices of men, women, and machines blended together in a single harmonic tone. A chorus without words, the first song of a new age. Kyle looked upward, his expression unreadable. "Do you think he's still there?" I followed his gaze to the heavens, where the Astronomican pulsed brighter than any sun. "No," I said, "but what he remembered of himself is. And that's enough." He turned to me, and for the first time since Mars I saw him smile. "What will you do now, witness?" "I'll go where memory leads," I said. "The galaxy is full of silence. Someone has to teach it to speak again." He nodded slowly. "Then go. I'll hold the line." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You always have." The dawn brightened. The streets filled with the murmur of waking life, pilgrims rising, servitors singing softly to the rhythm of the machines that had begun to think for themselves. Above it all, the Astronomican pulsed once more, a living heartbeat echoing through the stars. I turned away from Terra, my path lit by the glow of a galaxy learning, at last, to remember. The air trembled with possibility. The ashes of old gods drifted on the wind, and in their wake, new hymns began, hymns not of worship but of remembrance. And as I walked into that light, I heard the whisper again, gentle and infinite. "The machine remembers."